What we didn't have were a bunch of pain in the ass VCs and bankers and people telling us you have to scale and you have to do this. It scaled. We just, that's one of the beauties. As I said, we were left alone. We were left alone to fail or succeed or both.
Hi, everyone. What follows is my conversation with entrepreneur, author, and public speaker extraordinaire, Andy Nulman. This is the first podcast interview I ever recorded, and the way it happened was kind of random and funny. Andy and I were connected on LinkedIn, and one day I came across his profile, and it had this really funny byline. He wrote, "I have the guts you wish you had." So I sort of chuckled and I said, screw it. I'm writing to this guy. This guy's provoking me. So I wrote, "Hey, Mr. Nulman, I have the guts you think I wish I had." I don't even know what I was expecting, honestly. I probably expected no answer. I didn't put too much thought into it. I just felt he was being playful. There was this fun vibe to it. And I decided just to have some fun with it. But turns out he answered me right away. "Hi, Fred, how are you?" Like super nice. And so we started joking around a bit back and forth. And I thought, man, Andy's such a nice guy. And I'm sure he would be such a fun and interesting person to interview. So I asked him if he'd accept to be interviewed by me. He graciously accepted. And this literally is how my podcast started. As you'll see, Andy has accumulated a wealth of experience in life and business. He's the co-founder of the Just for Laughs Festival in Montreal, which under his leadership went from being the super small local event to becoming the largest comedy festival in the world. But with Andy, you quickly realize he's much more than just another businessman. He's a very funny and engaging character in his own right. He's an original thinker, and he's just the kind of teacher you wish you had had in university. He brings a wealth of experience and perspectives for all aspiring artists and entrepreneurs, and anyone really who wants to achieve anything creative. From why you should be careful before relying too much on investor money, to why you need to make room for uncertainty and risk in your life, what he calls the devil's 10%, to why you shouldn't trust people who don't like balloons. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Andy Nulman. Andy Nulman, welcome.
Oh, hello, welcome. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
How are you doing today?
Life is beautiful. Sitting here.
What are you
snow is
sipping
falling. I am sipping Budweiser Zero. I think it's coming to you in reverse, mirrored image, but it's what Budweiser Zero is. It's non-alcoholic beer, so it's. Not that I have a problem with alcohol. I just have a problem with, drinking alcohol at 3:00 in the afternoon. So,
do you find that you get a little bit of the buzz, just like the Pavlovian reflex when you drink the beer?
You know what? No, I really don't. The problem is I find I don't get a bit of the buzz when I drink real beer. That's the problem. So there we go. But I remember years ago when I was at Just for Laughs, when Labatt was the first people to come out with, it was 0.5. That was the name of the beer. And they told us, they said that it's non-alcoholic and they could, sell it, to schools. He says it's not illegal for kids to drink this, although they wouldn't do it. They think it would be bad, a bad political and PR move, but totally illegal. I mean, if a kid wants to drink this, no problem.
Yeah, you can sell those in schools.
So, but I don't think there'll be a company that does that for the next little while. At least not the grade schools or high schools.
No, definitely be like advertising to children and be a big controversial thing. So
Lord knows how controversial advertising to children, how that doesn't happen these days, like on YouTube or exactly. In Roblox or places like that. But anyway, I digress.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
The hypocrisy sometimes. Yeah, the hypocrisy sometimes.
Yeah. So okay, I'm gonna shut up. You go.
No, it's good. This is great. So for those who don't know you, you're one of the founders of the Just for Laughs Festival, which is really, I mean, either you read different places, people say the largest comedy festival in the world, or at the very least one of the largest comedy festivals in the world.
There's nothing. Yeah. Look, I'm far away from that. It's been years since I've been part of it. I left. I'm retired now, but I still have a lot of feelings for it. It was a child of mine, and it is the largest event in the world. There's nothing that even comes close, and has many.
But you were really instrumental in making it happen. I mean, before you came on board in the 80s, it was a small French only 2-day event. In
Yeah.
1985, you introduced the English version. And since then, I mean, it's absolutely top of the pyramid. I mean, the who's who of comedy, right? Jerry Seinfeld, Dave Chappelle, Louis C.K., the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
How
And
did you do it? I mean, yeah.
well, the real story is this. I mean, although it's perhaps not politically correct to name him these days, but really, you have to give credit to Gilbert Rozon. He's the one who
Of
started
course.
started in French. He's the one who brought me along. He's the one who started in English and said, "I want you to go ahead and grow this. Can you grow this?" And I was a kid. What am I going to say? No. Of course, I'm going to say, yeah, of course. I'm going to do this. But it was a different time back then. It was a different time. It was there was no such thing as a comedy festival. Number one. Number
Mm,
two, life was different. So you didn't know if you were, failing or succeeding. You were just doing, and there were no precedents. So anything you did set a precedent, and
mm,
it was really an interesting time to be able to go ahead and be adventurous, to make mistakes, to deal with them, and to have these amazing victories that you didn't even plan for. The other good thing was, timing is everything. Timing is everything in comedy, and timing is everything in business. And with Just for Laughs, we really happened to be at the right place at the right time because the comedy boom happened. And that's because of cable television. We were there right at I guess the dawning of cable television. Cable television needed product, and stand-up comedy was a really good cable TV product because you could do a lot of it. It was not expensive to do, and we happened to be there, in the right place at the right time. So all these things converged, and and the fact that we were allowed to do what we wanted. It's like life is
right.
different now. Life is different now in so many ways in terms of the entertainment industry being such a strong industry, where before it was
Mm,
quite kind of loose back then. And also the things you can get away with, even content wise, back then are things you can't get away with these days. I don't
mm.
think, first of all,
Yeah, the
I would
PC thing is out of control today.
I would hate to be, and I get the PC thing, and I get it, and I have no qualms with it, but it does put a damper on comedy. And
Mm,
it's not A. I don't think that Just for Laughs could be Just for Laughs was started today, and B. I wouldn't want to do it today because you have
mm,
to walk too many fine lines. We walked fine
mm,
lines; things exploded, but the explosions weren't that bad. These days,
mm,
the explosions would put you out of business, and it did. It basically
mm.
almost did with Just for Laughs, but that's a whole other story we don't need to get into today.
But Andy, I'm hearing a lot of modesty here because I'm hearing freedom to operate, and I'm hearing right place, right time. But
Yeah.
I know that there must have been certain strategies that you followed that allowed Just for Laughs to do what no other festival did in the world, certainly in the 80s, and to build at the scale to which you did. Um, if you can share with us, like what were, in your estimation, some of those key tactics or strategies that you followed that worked that allowed you to build such an unbelievable, successful festival?
Okay. Well, what we didn't have were a bunch of pain in the ass VCs and
Mm,
bankers and people telling us you have to scale and you have to do this. It's scaled. We just, that's one of the beauties. As I said, we were left alone. We were left alone to fail or succeed or both. And it was, what it's like? It's like discovering a place, and you go there and you discover you can build what you want there on this piece of land where nobody's there. You can build what you want. You can dig here, and you put a little, pond there, and a park here, and a high rise here, and you can do it. And then what happens is, people start moving in, and it becomes a city. And suddenly there's zoning and regulations, and that's basically what happened. We got in early. We got in early.
mm,
And we were able to do, and there was no pressure for us to do anything except the pressure we put upon ourselves. So nobody was saying, "Oh, listen, you're going to scale," and we're looking at your numbers, and we're not seeing the
mm.
fast enough growth. It grew on its own. It grew on its own. Why? Because of the fact that there was demand for it, and because we took a lot of risk. We took a lot of risks. We took a lot of shots, and we were able to have a certain swagger because we were going where no one had gone before. So
So that's an interesting combination of taking risk without an investor breathing down your neck and giving you external sort of metrics that you have to hit. So that seems to be like a magical situation I've seen also with a lot of entrepreneurs where you can allow the business to grow organically, but you can also start taking risks and kind of see where it goes without having to hit certain benchmarks, which is what you often see after, a round of financing that everybody sort of chases today. What you seem to be saying is that, look, we had all this freedom, we had all this land that we could explore, but at the same time, we could just do what we did. It wasn't about satisfying any external sort of force.
Well, I'd say yes to that, except that we had to satisfy, if I remember my count correctly, 8 external forces. But we had to satisfy them in an organic manner. And each one of them, I used to call this the spinning the octopus, because an octopus that's tentacles can come and strangle you and grab you like that. But if you spin an octopus, its tentacles, by centrifugal force, are going to go out, right? So if you spin an octopus, you have 8 tentacles in the air going this way, horizontal to the ground, parallel to the ground, horizontal. So the 8 tentacles of the octopus, the 8 people we had to go ahead and satisfy were, of course, the public, first and foremost, because if the public didn't buy tickets or watch the shows, you were dead. The performers had to say, wow, this is great. I love it. You had to do things for the performers. I remember performers would come to us and say, this is incredible, because they're used to playing some shitty comedy club with a crummy fake brick wall or a moldy old curtain, and they come to us with this set and 8 cameras and lighting. So that was cool. There was the media. You had to give the media something to talk about. I may forget some here, so you have to excuse me, but you had to give the media something exciting to talk about. There were the sponsors. Of course, the sponsors put the money in, and you had to make sure that they were satisfied and happy. There was the government, because we had government grants. So that's 5. There were the TV networks, 6, because you had to deliver it right, the content for them and make sure that these people were happy. And there were 7 and 8. Now I can't remember the 7th and 8th. They'll come to ourselves, the employees. We always made sure we had to enjoy. They had to be worth it, because it wasn't fun. Everyone thought, "Oh, you're in the comedy business. Isn't that fun?" No, it wasn't fun at all. It was a pain in the ass. We were miserable, but we were miserable so others can have fun. And we were the way we used to. I still remember we used to go to the back of the audience and watch, and we would just see. This is what you would see. Okay? You would see a whole sea of this undulating shoulders, because people were laughing. And when they're laughing, you're watching a whole bunch of people laughing. You just see shoulders doing that, and that was amazing satisfaction for us. So that's 7, and I can't remember the 8th, but that's pretty good. To remember 7.
Yeah, I mean, if you can create value. So you saw sort of the whole balancing act as creating value for multiple stakeholders at the same time, right? You had to not just focus on the public or focus on the acts. You kind of have this multifaceted,
every
all
one
the
of them,
stakeholders.
every one of them. And I'll tell you, and what would happen. So, okay, we talked about. Let's put it another way. Let's take away the octopus analogy. Let's use an octagon. Let's use a shape. And if you're spinning an octagon, it spins. It's beautiful. It's in motion. But as soon as one side gets too heavy or one side gets too light, the balance is off and it crashes. And that's what we had to make sure. So, we couldn't do things and piss off any one of our 8 stakeholders. So yeah, it was a balancing act. But in the end, there wasn't any one of these who was really making our lives miserable at the expense of one of the others. So which happens from time to time, in the VC world. Look, I saw it in my company I had with Gardner Boards, the Airborne Mobile, and at one point in time, and I don't want to name names here, but we had a major shareholder named Cybird who bought 85% of the company and spent over $100 million to do so. And then a lot of the people, for different reasons, were they basically, I don't say ganged up, but they were dissatisfied with Cyber, and not that I disagree with some of with them with why they were or they were pissed off at Cyber, but it just got to a point where one investor was pissing off another investor, and then what happens? Nothing good comes of that.
Right, you get to a situation where your attention is diverted, and you can no longer create value for all of the stakeholders. That's tough. That takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of.
And you got to choose sides and play the political game. I got to say, I don't think it can happen these days. I don't think it can happen anymore because people have just gotten too sophisticated, and there's the algorithms and the financial models, and not that they didn't exist, but nobody was looking at the entertainment business in that way back then. So I don't think it
Okay,
could happen.
but then let me put this to you. Would you feel like if a project or if a venture were self-financed, that they would have more of that same kind of freedom to operate that you guys had, that would maybe recreate those conditions?
Well, sure, self-financing means you can say "fuck you" to anybody.
That's right.
Self-financing says, "Hey, you know what? It's my money. I'll do what I want with it." And you see that. You see, entrepreneurs, people who are self-financed, can say no to things. It's and again, I don't want to bum anybody out, nor do I want to come across as some great expert on this because I'm not. But once you start taking money from people, it's hard to say no. The more you take, the harder it is to say no. And the investor says, "We want to see more of this." One point, you can't just go to the investor and say, "Go screw yourself." The investor can say, "Yeah, go screw myself." Wait, my friends, let's see who wins out in the end. And then maybe you do have the power to do that, but still, it's never going to end. It's never going to end up good. And if you're self-financed, you can do what the hell you want. But
Yeah,
these
a lot of
days,
entrepreneurs just chase that next financing deal. And I mean, I've seen it too. The operational
I've lived
consequences
it.
of that. You got to be careful.
I've lived it. Yeah, you really got to be careful. Luckily, I got to say, we had some wacky investors in the early days of Airborne. It was really early in the VC world, and so the investors came to it. They had a little bit of a different sophistication and headspace than they do today. But I got to say, I've been pretty lucky in my career with just for last at Airborne, and we started Play the Future. The investors we had were pretty good people, and were understanding, and they even understood the failure. Even when things didn't work out, they even understood that, and they said, "You know what? This is not my first rodeo. We understand that not everything works." And that's unbelievable to be able to deal with people like that, but not everyone's like that.
For sure. So, Andy, I have to say, you have the best tagline on LinkedIn by far. This is actually how I reached out to you. So you write, "I have the balls that you wish you had."
I would never put balls. I would never be vulgar on LinkedIn. I say, "I have the guts you wish you had." That's
okay. We'll have to fact check that. So the thing is that
I know because I wrote it. I never wrote balls.
You also wrote a book called POW, The Power of Surprise.
Yeah.
And I realized that that's kind of like what you did with that tagline, because LinkedIn's kind of like this politically correct vanilla social network where everybody's trying to look for professional. Nobody's trying to say anything out of turn. Everybody's trying to stay in line with the social trends or use like the thing of the day to get a few likes. And I realized, man, here's somebody that's coming out there with a statement like this, and it kind of hit me. And then you responded. You were super cool about it. And I'm like, okay, so it almost felt like you were playfully provoking people to have a little bit more guts, a little bit more chutzpah. That's how I read it. Do you feel that this spirit, this idea of like this in your face, make things happen, is kind of lost a little bit in this generation where people grow up everything in public, and kids are kind of scared of being judged and maybe being a little bit more cautious than you guys were?
I don't, I have two kids who are in business, and both of them are very audacious in their own way. Very not like me. One of them is perhaps a little bit more extreme. The other one is a little more conservative. But both take the proper amount of risk, and both have the proper amount of personality. I did that on LinkedIn for a reason, because in essence, I have nothing to lose. Well, what's going to happen? Someone say, "Oh, I'm not. I don't need you." I mean, it's not. I'm not caught in an attitude, but I've done my time. I've worked. I've spent 46 years now in the workplace. I don't need you anymore. If you wanted to deal with me, this the package, and maybe and also what it does, it doesn't it's one of those things. It's like a Nigerian internet email scam in reverse. You know what I mean by we have these Nigerian internet scams.
Yeah, of course.
They go ahead and they send you an email, and there's spelling mistakes in them, and the grammar is shitty, and you say, what intelligent person would respond to this? That's the point. An intelligent person wouldn't respond to it. They'd say this is a scam. What they're looking for are people who are not that intelligent and a lot more naive, and we're going to say, "Oh, this looks interesting. I'm going to, that is the way you spell there. THERE, like their book, THERE. That's exactly the way you spell it. And I'm going to respond to this. And then and they said, that's we want to respond to it. So the same thing with this is that in reverse, that if people will say, oh my God, I would never work with somebody who says I have the guts, you wish you had. Well, that's great, because I wouldn't want to work with you too. I would be the last person I'd want to work with. So it's great.
I thought it was funny, man. I thought it was funny. I'm like, this guy's a character. What is this? And I wrote to you and I said, man, I have the guts that you think I wish I had. And then we joked. And then you were right away super friendly, joking around. I'm like, this guy's playing another game here,
It's not a game at all. It's that's the whole point for it. It's not a game at all. It's authenticity. It's just me. It's just it's like I can't hide anything. If anybody really wants to find anything out, they'll find it out. A perfunctory YouTube, Google search will show you basically what you need to know about somebody. If you really need to dig in deep, there are places you can go for $100. You can get, you can find out, the amount of hairs I have on my back if you want for that amount of money. So the thing about LinkedIn, the thing that makes me laugh, I actually had a very standard LinkedIn tag, and I actually, with COVID hit, I started to taking all types of courses. I had time. I was at home.
Yeah, online courses, big thing. Yeah,
tons of them. Yeah. And one of them was on branding, and they said, when you're at LinkedIn, be yourself, because everyone talks. So I said, oh, that's great. So that's why I put that into place. I actually learned that from one of the classes I took. And
it was really cool. And when I read also that your interest in the power of surprise, you teach entrepreneurs how to leverage the power of surprise. I'm like, man, that's what Andy did, man. He surprised me. You spoke in a tone that nobody speaks in that medium, right? In that social network. And that's what drew my attention. I'm like, what is this? I never send private messages to anybody. And it worked. It just kind of drew me out. And I'm like, let me have some fun with this, right?
So I got to tell you something.
Yeah.
Most of the time, you're a unique individual because you responded to this. Most people don't respond. Most people are afraid. And that's why one of the things I always
that's what I was trying to get to, Andy. That's what I was trying to get to. It's like, it was almost like you're provoking people. Like, hey guys, what are you guys all doing here? Everybody's out here being scared, putting an image on, putting this fake, like, this is like a little bit of like old school, in your face. Here it is. Let's have a real conversation, right?
Well, there's three things I want to bring up on this. Okay, three. One is, and I want you to remember this. It's going to be course. It's going to be end of book. And it's going to be change. We'll start with change. When people always talk, and this is what makes me laugh all the time, in marketing, people talk about so much. We want to change. We want to be innovative. We want to, do things differently. We want to think outside the box. So
disruption.
What happened? Yeah, and you come up with, here's something. And say, well, I don't want that much disruption. Can you tone it back a bit? Okay, what about this? Still a little bit nutty. Can you bring it down a bit more? How about this? Almost there. Okay, what about this? That's great.
Yeah,
well,
you wrote in one of your blog posts. Yeah. You wrote in one of your blog posts. Everybody loves change until you change something.
Yeah, exactly. They want others to change, and then they say, "Well, why couldn't we do that?" So that's the first thing. Second thing is the end of the book. So I wrote that book, The Power of Surprise, and I got to say, it did well, but it didn't do as well as I thought it was going to do. Why? Because most people don't want to do this. Most people don't want craziness. They don't want surprise. They want
too risky.
Status quo. They
don't really want to take that risk.
They want, that was a great surprise. Let's do it again. No, you don't do it again. It's like a magic trick. You do a magic trick once. You don't do a magic trick 3 times so people can watch your hands and see, let me see how it's done. The thing about a magic trick is not to know how it's done. The thing about a magic trick is for you to be odd, for you to say, wow, it's spectacular, and to have a sense of wonder, not to say, well, let me figure out how it's done. So what I did in the book, I had this thing, and I made it seem like, you got a lucky book, but every book was the same. It said, I cut it off in the middle of a sentence, and I'm saying, listen, we're cutting the book here. But if you read this far, you got enough. Right now, you have a special edition, and if you go ahead and if to really close off this book, you're one of those few people, dial this number. And what the number would do, it was a 1-800 number, and it would, no matter where in the world you were, it would reach me. And I kept my phone on. My wife would kill me.
Are you serious?
My phone on 24/7, and I would get calls. from New Zealand, from Australia, from
That is so
Tibet,
cool.
and people were floored when I would answer, and they would say, sometimes it would wake me up, and they said, hello. I said, yeah, who's this? And they said, why are you calling? Oh, it's from the book. Oh, hi, it's me. And they were amazed, but they couldn't believe it that someone would actually do this. And I had so much fun. I met so many really great people because of that, kindred spirits, so to speak. So that was two. And the third one is, wow, you talk about teaching entrepreneurs. If all goes well, and until I sign the contract, I never believe it. And even then, I still don't believe it until it actually starts. But I teach a lot at McGill, and I just put out a course outline for fall of this year, where the MBA program, this all goes back to when I taught last year, the MBA program, and most of my students were like dull and scared and boring and afraid to take risks and didn't want to do anything creative. I'd say 2/3 of them were like that. 1/3 were like, oh my God, how do I learn? So I said, okay, you all need to know this. So that I proposed this course, which it's not just proposed, it's like been accepted, but as I said, until this contract's signed. But it's called Creativity, Curiosity, and Guts, and it's basically teaching those three factors to in a faculty where basically everything is so analytical and numeric based, and marks and all that.
Do you think that's something that could be taught, or are you going to sort of get into some kind of weird performance art in that course, like just kind of prod people's attitude and mindset a little bit, make them uncomfortable?
Both,
right?
Of course, it can be taught.
That's really cool.
But also, you don't teach that by saying, okay, here are, and I once, I'm going to go back to LinkedIn for a second. I once gave a speech for Rogers where, and I did for Rogers, I did it for Natrel, a few other people, but it was a speech on creativity, and talked about, here are the 4 ways to be creative. 1, do this. 2, do this. 3, and then people were writing it down. Guys, are you crazy? Are you crazy? You don't learn how to be creative by a PowerPoint, by 4 steps. So it's not like a 4-step program, like a 12-step program on how to control your alcoholism. Jesus, that's not the way you do it. So, but that
so how do you do it? What is your perspective on creativity? How do you get into that lateral thinking and outside the box and something completely fresh and curious and
I'm writing
out
it
of
now,
nowhere?
Fred. I'm writing it now. But basically, there are steps to take. There are ways to look at things. There are, one way I always like to preach is virgin contact lenses. This was something that I found in the book, in my book way back when I wrote about it. But it's like seeing things from a whole new way, seeing things as if they never existed. Like, when comedy, and I hate to go back to comedy, but it seems to follow me. I got a call one time from a journalist, and I said, look, I'm not involved in Just for Laughs anymore, or in comedy business, because he said, what would you do during COVID? Like now, how would you have comedy shows? And I said, at this point in time, what I would do, what's being done, kudos to people. I'm so happy they're doing this. I'm so happy they're doing these type of Zoom shows. Hi, how are you? Whatever they're doing. But what I would do is say, okay, and this is the virgin contact lens thing, say, what happens if comedy, there was never such a thing as a comedy club. Let's say there never was such a thing. You never got on stage, and no one ever had a mic there. And this was the way to do it. You have to see. So this was, you had virgin territory, and you have to see things differently. Don't look at the way things were, but you're seeing things for the first time. What would comedy be like if this was the actual way that, someone said, hey, this is how I can communicate something funny to people. What would it be like? And come up with it that way. So it's seeing things for the first time, and it's tough. It's tough. I had the same thing with CCM. It's a consulting client of mine, and I discuss this with them often. But I'm saying, why do skates still look like that? Skates basically, the materials are better, and but in essence, a skate for 2021 is not that much different from a skate from 1921. It's still a boot with laces, with these things coming down a blade. It's
that black boot, and
why?
the same look.
And why is it laces, and why is it up the middle, and why hasn't somebody reinvented a skate? Because a skate, everyone says in your mind, that's what a skate looks like. What if you don't know what a skate looks like? What if I can go to Tibet? If I went to Tibet and I went to these people who had never seen an ice skate, I say, here's what we want to do. We need people to go fast across a frozen ice surface. What would you have? Maybe they would come up with something a whole lot different than what an ice skate looks like.
So looking at things for the first time, do you feel, because you span a lot of different worlds, you're in business, you obviously had a tremendous career in comedy, you're also in the academic world a little bit, right? You teach at McGill. So do you feel like it's like looking at things for the first time is almost sometimes gets harder the more stuff you learn in a conventional way? Like people who go to school and were taught to sort of like do things the way they normally are done, or that an authority think is the right way. Do you feel like sometimes that can almost create even more challenges to that perspective of seeing things for the first time? And can you train that? Can you sort of get better at that?
Yes and yes. Yes, you can train it, and yes, of course, it makes it harder. But at least you have a reference point. At least you know, okay, this is what everyone thinks something looks like, so I'm going to make it look like that, or I'm going to make it act like that. I'm going to make it sound like that because everyone thinks it sounds like this. So, same thing.
So developing almost that childlike, naive. I forget what I read. I think in one of my online courses that I'm taking right now on flow, they talk about being naive, like forcing yourself to be naive about things, like looking at things like, hey, well, I have no idea what's going on here, and that sort of puts you in a different mindset.
It's exactly the point. And part of the course that again. And I don't want to give myself an ahora, which is a Yiddish term for like giving yourself like a curse. But this course, part of it is it's a word I learned called neoteny, Neotony, neoteny, and it means like looking at things in a very childlike manner. And so that's the whole part of the course is neoteny. It's it's like childlike and genies, because it also is I believe a lot in the genie effect, which I can go into. Don't necessarily have to, but I think it's also a very important point in business that most people ignore. Because look, again, I when I first started teaching at McGill, they wanted me to teach a course called Marketing and Society, and they gave me this book and they gave me this course outline, and I'm saying, holy shit. I said, teach it. If I had to take this course, I would be asleep in 30 minutes. I'd be dead. This is dull as shit. And the good thing was that a guy who I was in McGill with, Peter Todd, was actually the dean of management at the time. And I said, Peter, look, thank you for thinking of me, but there's no way I can do this. There's no way I can do it for none of your students. I can't do it for me. It would be just a cash grab to say, let me just make whatever it takes and let me get through this. Horrific. It would be a terrible experience for everybody. But if you would let me come up with a course, that I think people need. And it was still called Marketing and Society, but it was totally irrelevant. It's like having a something called tomato, yet it's a barbecue. You say, oh, what's going on here? Yeah, but that's exactly what it was. It was called Marketing and Society, but the course was actually about the integration of YouTube as a business tool, which today is so cool. Second nature. But when I taught this 10 years ago, it was like, holy shit, what's going on here?
So, I've got to sign up to continuing education at McGill to take one of your courses. That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, you got to get into the MBA program first. Good luck.
So, Andy, you also founded a media company. As you mentioned, you were working with brands like CCM, but many others like Maxim, Family Guy, the NFL, Taco Bell, Airborne Media. Deloitte named it as one of North America's fastest growing tech companies. You sold it
a couple years ago. Yeah.
You sold it for over $100 million. So you've got a 9-figure exit on your resume, which is super, super impressive. I know how rare that is.
Yeah, those are the days when 100 million was actually, big money. These days, you're still coming for 100 million. So,
Still a lot.
Yeah,
it's impressive. And then what I find fascinating, Andy, is that you then repurchased the company. So tell us a little bit about that adventure, that whole adventure of building up that company, selling it to a company in Japan, correct? And then repurchasing it.
Well, Again, what happened with Garner and myself was being right place, right time, having guts, and also sometimes desperation. We started the web company; it wasn't working, and we said we're either going to fold the company or just. And now it's all I'm using today's terms for yesterday's news. It wasn't called it at the time. We pivoted from a web company to a mobile company when there was no such thing as mobile media, no such thing as mobile entertainment. Phone screens were green with black dots on them. And we would go to people, to investors and to others, and we'd say, one day people are going to watch television on this. They say, are you guys nuts? What are you saying? You're crazy. What type of heresy is this, watching television on a phone? You're nuts. That's what we got. And, so we believed it was going to happen. So we said, well, let's try and make this happen. But, we built that company. What was the question? It was about the exit. What I say was these days that was big money at the time. We were we weren't a unicorn. We were like a pony. I guess we were a pony.
A really colorful pony.
A pony with a kid's birthday hat. That's what we were at the time. But
pretty damn valuable pony though.
But what we did, but basically, you can talk about strategy and everything. It was desperation. We had to come up with something, and we saw mobile being big in Japan and Europe, and we said, okay, we're a mobile company today. And I just read something the other day, and I think in the Wall Street Journal, that was really what we believed, and what I tell my kids all the time. If you come up with an idea and everyone says, oh, that'll never work, it's stupid, it's ridiculous, that's where you go. If everyone says, oh, it's the greatest thing I've ever seen, that's where you got to turn away from. Because if people start,
why is that? Is that because if everybody thinks it's a great idea, it's almost like already like too much in currency? That means everybody's thinking about it.
Correct,
and if everybody's like, I don't get it, that means it's sort of against the grain, and maybe there's a chance there's something special.
Exactly. And I use Bitcoin as an example. And I'll tell you why I use Bitcoin as an example. I was, when I say I was at the at the cusp of certain things, I was at the cusp of certain things. I was at the cusp of when cable TV became big, when it just started, and that's how luckily at Just for Laughs we glommed on, and cable TV helped drive where Just for Laughs was going. I was there at the beginning of the internet, and the internet helped me get out of Just for Laughs and go follow my dream there. But we were there a little too early, and the stuff we wanted to do on the internet, which was content and humor and video, was really too early. So we went to mobile. We were really, really early in mobile, but there were less. It wasn't a bubble at the time. It was really early, and not too many eyes were on it, and we were there. And when things started to happen, it pulled us. So now I go to Bitcoin. Now, I was really, and see, I took advantage of the first three, but not this one, which I still kick myself. I was on a ground floor of Bitcoin. The less than $100 Bitcoin.
Oh wow!
But here's what bothered me about Bitcoin, and I read about it. I was reading about it in Satoshi, whatever his name is, and all this stuff. And but what bothered me were two things. One is it was tough to sell, and two, it was wacky to buy, because the place, I'll tell you where I saw Bitcoin on sale.
With all the wallets, I remember early on, it was hard. You had to sort of figure it out, how to enter that marketplace.
Still got to, but now you can call a couple of people. But back then, there was a place on Saint Laurent right near my office. It was down the street. It was Saint Laurent Milton. It was a store that had African carvings and masks and some wacky,
and you could buy some Bitcoin there.
Yes. And I'm saying, do I want to invest in a place where you buy Bitcoin in a place where they sell African carvings and wacky masks and water bottles? It didn't seem to make sense. And then the next place I saw Bitcoin was a machine in a cafe on de Maisonneuve and Drummond. And I'm saying, and that's, but I kick myself, because I would always say, when you go to a trade show, you can go to the big booths, and it's really interesting. They have booth babes, and they have stuff to give away, and merch and all sorts of shit, and guys in ties with clipboards and all that stuff. But the real exciting stuff at trade shows are the things on the fringes, like the ones in the back where the guy can't afford the proper table and he's near the toilets. That's where the really cool stuff is. I remember this distinctly. I was at the CTIA conference, which is the Cellular Telecommunications and Internet Association. That was where all the mobile people went. And that, when we were in the business, Verizon and Sprint and blah, 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 they were all there. And Airborne, we were there, and a whole bunch of other mobile companies. Like, we were teeny weeny, but we were still in the industry. But we went to CTIA, and some guy had this booth, and he was doing electronic cigarettes. And he was showing this. I said, this is insane. But, I said, in the end, I said, it's kind of interesting. And again, not that I was going to, I'm a non-smoker, an anti-smoker, but, if I would have put a few dollars into electronic cigarettes at the time, it became Juul, and Juul became, a multi-billion-dollar company. But that's what
it's again the running theme of the power of surprise. It seems like that's a running theme in your life. Like, you look for the thing that's outside of the obvious, the thing that is hidden, the thing that is not what everybody's doing. And that seems to be almost that contrarian thread seems to be what you've been following throughout your career, and developing lenses for that. It seems to be something that's really powerful.
Yeah, but it's also one of the things that people are afraid of doing. And again, even myself.
Why are people so afraid of doing that?
I don't know, but even myself, I'm saying, I give you another example. Do you know if you heard of a company called Potluck, POTLOC, Potluck?
Haven't, no.
When I was doing stuff for Montreal 375, I ran into this guy, Rudolph Barrar, who's really nice. I mean, he was a kid at the time, really nice kid. And he had this company, and he said, what we're going to do is we have a company that, when there's empty stores, we'll go into the community and we'll poll the community to see what type of store they would want there. I'm saying, that's one of the most stupid things I've ever heard. Who gives? What are they going to say? I want a flower shop. I want a Japanese restaurant, so that's they want. Who cares? I mean, it didn't seem to make sense to me. Now this guy is like, this company is worth like $800 million, and he's on the cover of Forbes magazine. But when you hear these ideas, and I once wrote a blog post on this. Every idea is born the same, even the stupid ones. Like, great ideas, stupid ideas. They're all the same at birth. There's nothing that separates a great idea from a stupid idea other than where it goes. But they're all equal at birth. So sometimes when you hear something, you say, "Oh, that's one of the stupidest things I've ever heard," that is perhaps a sign for you to say that I'm going to follow that. Because when you look at some of the things that are basically standards today, they started out as ideas that people say that's the most stupid thing I've ever heard. So
it's amazing. Andy, I want to talk about the devil's 10%. This is something that you wrote about that's absolutely really, really interesting. And I want to get your thoughts on it. So I'm going to read little chunks of your post on this. Okay.
Go ahead.
So this is what you write.
I love listening to myself. Go ahead.
This is what you write. Trust me, when you close your big deal, the thing that every entrepreneur sort of chases and people sort of fantasize about, even who are not entrepreneurs, when all the money's tucked away in the bank, before you even take your first step, the devil is there smiling, hand extended to shake yours and demand his 10%. Just when you think you're invincible, invulnerable, and that you finally made it big, the devil will be there with a kick in the gut reality check. Then you go on and talk about self-inflicted, right? What this means from a self-inflicted perspective: hubris, drugs, alcohol, gambling, poor decisions, wild egomania. And then you talk about sometimes it's external: mental health issues, sickness, jealousy, family breakups. Then you go on. But whether you suffer personally or observe as a weakened, wounded bystander, the devil's always by your side. And then you say, yeah, sure, all of these things can happen to anyone. But the difference with a winning entrepreneur is that they're on such a high that they're blindsided. They don't see it coming. And then this is the advice, Andy, that you give people. You say, be smart. Put the devil in your cap table. Give him his own line. Satan, 10%. And then I love this. If nothing else at this point, it'll at least make your investor pitches and board meetings more intriguing. So I'm going to play, this is a concept that really, again, hit me with that power of surprise. let me play the devil's advocate against the devil here for a second. How does giving the devil equity, and I know you're being sort of metaphorical with this, how is this going to help me deal with him, right? You mean like giving the devil his 10%. Can you just expound what you mean exactly by this concept of literally having a line item for the devil in your cap table?
Because you know what's going to happen. Oh yeah, we go back to the story you mentioned. How do we buy it back? How do we buy the company back for $1? How do we buy the company back for $1? Because of the fact that there was investor rebellion, one against the other. And then they put one of the investors in a bad way, and then this one had to react this way, which all made that Cybird had to go ahead and, because of some Japanese restrictions, say, look, we can't continue with this company, so we were able to buy it back for $1. Nothing good. When you buy something, nothing good happens for buying for $1 unless it's something that's worth 12 cents, and that's something that made 88 cents profit. It happens all the time, and by putting that line item in there, you're covered. You're covered because you say, when shit hits the fan, we will not only have the money to deal with it, but we'll know that it was okay. This is what we kind of expected. And that's why I said it. I really believe it, because I saw it happen at Airborne. I've seen it. And I didn't just make this up and say, okay, I'm going to just go ahead and write something because it sounds really good. I spoke to people. I spoke to friends of mine. I can name names. Mitch Garber, Rory Olson. My God. I can go on and on and on. Harley Finkelstein. I can go on and on and on. People who have, and every time they will always, there's always a horror story that comes along with it. And again, sometimes it's just timing. Sometimes it's just a family issue or a health issue that it's just timing. But the point there is, if you say, okay, I'm ready for it, I have the money and the headspace for it, great. If you don't, and suddenly you're on this major high, and suddenly, oops, somebody who you love dearly is ill, yikes! That could be the first step of a major downfall for you. So knowing it's there, and what's the worst thing that happens? The worst thing that happens is, hey, it never happens, and you suddenly have this big cash buffer to play with. But by and large, it always happens. You've seen it. And I'll give you the example. Tony Hsieh of Zappos. I mean, here's a guy who sold a company for what was it, $900 million to Amazon, $900 million, and he ends his life burning in a shed. That doesn't make any sense. And not burning in a shed. Oh, I just lost all my money and I'm homeless. No, the guy's still worth $880 million or whatever it was, or 920 or whatever, and he's burning in a shed because he's been sniffing nitrous oxide. How did that happen? How did it go from Tony Hsieh being the guy writing the book and making the whole world happy to dying in a shed? It doesn't make sense. So
how does the 10%? So I understand it almost as like an extreme uncertainty fund, or like a black swan fund, or like you never know what's going to happen.
It's a black swan uncertainty. You never know what's going to happen, but it's also a warning. It's a warning because, I remember, I still remember the advice of Rory Olson.
Is it almost like to guard against your own ego? Like you talk about egomania. It's like when you're super successful, you sort of get bloated and you think nothing can happen to you. And that's when you get blindsided.
And you think that, oh my God, am I smart now? What I'm going to do, I sold my company, I'm going to become an investor, and I'm going to invest in other companies because I'm so smart. Some people are that smart, and that's great, but a lot of people aren't, and they think they are. That's the worst part. Is this when you're fooling yourself and you don't understand your limitations, and you maybe don't want to show your limitations, because still you got to understand them. But it's really what it is. It's saying, watch out. And I guess the best advice I got on this was Rory Olson is a friend and a partner in Airborne. Gardner and I brought him along to help us grow the company, and was there for us when we sold. And Rory, when we sold, look, I did nicely. I had a really nice life at Just for Laughs, but I was, a meager equity portion, and I didn't know what money was, nor do I do now. But although I got to say, I learned a bit when we sold Airborne, and suddenly I was on a different plane. I remember Rory coming to me, went to lunch, and he said, "Look, you just made a whack of cash. Here's what you do: you plant a couple flags. You buy a couple things and plant a couple flags. Let them fly in the wind. And then what you do after you buy a couple things and plant a couple flags, you go on to your life the way it was before, as usual. You're not a different person. Your life doesn't change. You're not smarter. You're not better. It just happened to have a success in business." So what I did is I bought a watch. I bought a watch, 3 suits, a convertible, and an Andy Warhol painting. That's what I did. And
how much was the Andy Warhol painting?
I got it early. It was $35,000 US.
That's not bad.
No, I know exactly. I can't tell you what's worth now. But that's it. So basically, all these things together, were what, $150,000. $175,000.
Almost like satiate yourself a little bit. Have some fun, satiate yourself, but then go back to who you were. Don't have that radical break.
Yeah, I used to wear the watch. I drive the car. The watch is in a safe now. I haven't worn it since COVID. The car's long sold. The Warhol's above the fireplace. The 3 suits still fit, but who wears suits these days? So
I bet you the Warhol alone is worth more than what all the items cost.
So basically. But the point is, so that's what he said. You plant some flags, let them fly, and you are not. And I remember another thing, and again, people put too much emphasis on, like, even with Airborne, a certain, like in the latter part, people talked about scale and things to that effect as we were ramping the company up for sale. But we didn't, it just happened. We were in the right place at the right time, and we worked our ass off, and we had the right product and the right partners, and it all gelled, so it was like a wonderful, experience. But, in terms of, really understanding the processes of scaling a company, if people don't want to buy what you're selling, you can have all these wonderful processes all you want. You gotta make a great product. But I'll go back to, what I was saying about Rory and that lesson. People think that they're special and it happened because of them, and many times it had nothing to do with you. When I got the POW book, when I did that, I wrote that book, and it was not some half-assed book for self-published or some crummy little local publisher in the basement. It was Wiley Publishing. It was one of the biggest publishing companies in the States. So you can say to yourself, "Wow, look at me! I got a marketing book there for Wiley Publishing, one of the biggest publishers in the United States. How did I get that book?" There was the concept is great, I must say. I think that's a lot of fun. But basically, what happened was they have a number of books they would release a quarter, and they had a marketing book scheduled, and the author dropped out. There was an open space, and my agent happened to know there was an open space. And he called, says, "I got this idea for you. Here's this pitch," and they said, "Okay, it fills the space." So
timing again, but also the ability to work and deliver, right? Also having the great concept, also having the ability to put in the work ethic, right? It's that confluence.
Yeah. So, but we were on another tangent point. You asked me a question. We were talking about. I was mentioning here's the point that I wanted to get to about planting the flag. So my wife, we live in a pretty nice home, in Westmount. I don't know where your people are watching this from, but it's a pretty nice enclave in Montreal, and pretty nice place there. And so I sold the company, and my wife came to me. She says, "Look, there's this house down the street that's for sale," and at the time it was a fortune. It was like $900,000, and it's 2005, so we're talking about 16 years ago. And she says, "Oh, we got to go in, and you'll see the art will look great in the house, and blah blah blah." And I went in, and its house is spectacular, and it's beautiful, and 3-car garage, and blah blah blah. And I said, "What do we need this for? Our kids are both of our kids have moved out. It's you, me, and the dogs. I don't want that many. I don't want to entertain. I don't want to have all the many people in the house. I would rather. I'm looking to downsize. I don't want to, why go ahead and start mortgaging yourself and because I have to go to the next level." I said, "It's the other way around. But so many people think that this is what I got to do, business and personally, and I have to, I'm going to go ahead and force myself to get to the next level. What is the next level? The next level really is not any of this shit you buy. Let me tell you, I've heard that.
That's great. So some of your lessons that you've shared online, I just want your quick thoughts on these. We've already talked about everyone loves change until you change something. I got a couple more that I would like your quick thoughts on.
Shoot.
Number one, anything you do just for money will ultimately fail.
Oh, it's worse than that. Anything you do just for money will bite you in the ass.
Why?
Why? Because you're not doing it for the right reason. You're not doing it for
What's the right reason?
The right reason is of doing anything really is to make a mark, is to make somebody proud, is to say I want to change something and do something different. It's to make something better. That to me is why you do something, and is to take a chance, is to advance things. When you're doing something just for the money, you're going to not care about I go back to the spinning octopus. You're not going to care about the product or the people. You're just going to care about the money. And I have it's a long story. I'm not going to tell it, but I have a great story of the speech. The most I ever got paid for a speech was for Century 21. And it was such and I knew I was only doing it for the money because I said, nothing I can say is anything these people want to hear. And I told them that. And they said, no, they're going to be. I said, no, they're not. They're not going to. I looked at what your people wanted. They want to know how to sell more houses. I don't know that. No, they want to hear your stories. No, okay, great. And I said, I'll do it. Because what I should have said is, look, guys, it's not going to work. Fine. But they were throwing this money at me. I said, great, I'll take it. Anyway, I did this speech. It was a disaster from the third minute. It ended up, not only did everybody basically leave, but I was so bad that the guy who ran the conference had to come take the mic out of my hand and say, look, this ain't working. So what happened in the end? Okay.
And that's an example of something you did for the money and you felt it was the wrong reason.
Oh, it was totally wrong reason. I did just for the money. So not only did it bite me in the ass and humiliate me, but I had to give them the money back because they said, the speaking agent said, if you ever want to get another gig ever, you better refund them their money. So they'll say, okay, that's good. So in the end, I didn't even get the money. So that's what happens. That's a very, very, very valuable.
So you need that emotional anchor, doing it to improve things, doing it to make your mark, doing it for a personal reason, an intrinsic reason, not just chasing the cash.
Oh, 100%. And no matter what it is, I mean, do something that improves, something, and maybe it just improves you. But look, somebody asked me this a few weeks ago, and I said the only real motivation I ever had in life, and not that I even wanted them to tell me, but I didn't want to hear it from their mouths, but I wanted them to talk about amongst themselves. But it's for my family to be proud of me. That's all I really cared about. And my kids, my wife, my parents, who, at the time when they were alive, that's all I really cared about. Everything else is secondary.
Amazing. This is my favorite one. Nice is worse than bad. Nice is worse than bad.
Because I remember, just for laughs, what do you think? Oh, it's nice. It's nice. Nice is like not. Wow, it was the greatest thing I ever saw. Oh my God! Or Jesus Christ, how could you ever think that would work? That's terrible. That's awful. So those are the ranges of emotion. Nice is not only just in the middle. It's not even just non-committal. It's non-committal to the point of, oh, I wish I would. Why did I kind of waste my time doing it?
It's almost just like polite and uninterested.
Yeah, I remember when you see something that say, oh my God, it's the greatest thing I've ever seen. Like Cirque du Soleil's Beatles Love. When I saw that show, I said, oh my God, I'm a big Beatles fan. I said, I can't believe how they put this together. I've seen shows that are horrific, but at least there's an emotion there, and you never forget the horrific shows. I remember we had a show just for laughs that was so bad, people literally stormed the box office, and they were freaking and yelling, and we said, we'll give you your money back. Don't worry, we'll double your money. And people wrote me and said, I just want to tell you, thank you for your offer, but I'm not taking you up on it because I've always wanted to go to a show where people got booed off the stage, and I finally got to see it. It was it was the worst show I ever saw, but it was one of the greatest experiences of my life to be able to sit through something like that. I said, wow.
because it created emotion. There was something to hate. There was something it almost goes back to, I'm thinking that this old this saying of the only bad press is no press, right? It's like if there's indifference,
Well, then again,
there's no reaction.
if they say you're a pedophile, that's bad press. I'd rather have no press. If they say that
That's pretty bad.
you're an animal abuser, I'd rather have no press. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of bad press, but it's just that what it is. I don't think that I don't believe in that statement at all. What I do believe in is, let somebody have an emotion. It's like, be hot, be cold, but don't be tepid.
Mm, love it. Another one. Beware the person who doesn't like balloons.
Yeah.
Why?
This reminds, because it actually happened just for last night. I want to go into names and all that. There was this woman who was a real nasty piece of work, and we had these balloons. There was some of these birthday, all these balloons around. Of course, most people would see balloons. Oh, they're playing with them. And this one went with her high heel and stomped them until they broke. And I'm saying, and it gave her pleasure. And I said, it's just perfect. You're seeing this person hating balloons, and you say, beware the person who will not find the joy, like the childhood joy in a balloon. And I still live that to this day. I believe that there are certain things that bring childlike joy. Enjoy that, and when you see somebody trying to destroy childlike joy, stay away from that person. So that's why beware the person who hates balloons.
I love it. Andy, by any standard out there, you've had not only an uber successful career, but a very meaningful one, because you are coherent in everything that you say. There's themes in your life. You're always searching to create value. You're always searching for, that little nugget that's outside the realm of what everybody thinks. Today that you can sort of look back on your realm. What motivates you and drives you today when you look back at your career and looking forward at what you want to accomplish?
I guess what motivates me are two things. One is when people say it can't be done, and two, when it's a challenge. And let's go back to LinkedIn for a second. Yeah, I have that tagline on LinkedIn, but also what I have on LinkedIn, my first two things you see are these two speeches I gave, both of them which had a very strong improvisational element in them. And some of the improvisation is it could work, but it could also fail. But the point is, given that or giving something safe, standing at a podium with notes and reading, or just with words and reading the words and clicking on a PowerPoint that have the same words as you're reading, anyone can play it safe, and I'm sure you get nice applause. But I would rather take that shot to say, "Wow, I did something new." And even if it falls, but at least I'm saying, "Man, at least I did that." At least I did that, and that's what motivates. It's to do something that hasn't been done. Look, I'm putting together this speech. I don't want to give it away, but some kids asked me to be part of TEDx Marianopolis, and they said the theme is the unknown. And would you talk about the stuff you did in business? And it's so easy to put together a speech about, kids, these days, here's what you should do, and here's 9 tips on how to be this, and going into the unknown. But I'm saying that's too easy. So I'm coming up with something completely different, but something I know that they may not like in the end. But I know that, hey, you know what? It's my challenge. It's my challenge. I want to do something that either you may fall in love with or you may detest, but at least you're not going to say, okay, when's the next person? So when's the next person?
So Andy, look, and when I hear you speak, I think of, there's a research that I read once that talked about the link between courage and creativity. And it almost seems like, you keep going back to those two themes of do what's creative, do something new, do something fresh, have the guts to do it. Don't just fall back on, the conventional, the obvious. And I think it's, do you have any moonshots that you feel inside of you that you still want to take?
Plenty of moonshots. But again, for every moonshot, starts off as as a firecracker. It doesn't necessarily have to be a rocket booster right from the start. Yeah, right now these days, Fred, every shot is a moonshot. There's nothing. I don't do anything standard. I just did some stuff. I mentioned CCM, but I wrote this ad that is talks about inclusivity and it just not the themes of the day, but it shows that hockey can be racially sensitive and inclusive, and
I know that's been a real challenge in the world of hockey, right?
Oh,
Getting
yeah,
them
yeah.
to sort of,
But
that culture hasn't been sort of adapting to, just generally the diversity, the openness. There's been a lot of instances of subtle racism, not so subtle racism.
And that was a challenge. That was a challenge. The challenge was you can do something that's standard, or you can do something that is going to make people choke up and shed tears, and that's what we try to do. So it's all a moonshot now, because if it's not a moonshot, as I always say at this stage of the game in my life, it's is it more interesting than me reading a book or walking my dog? And if it's not more interesting than me reading a book or walking my dog, I'm not going to do it. I'd rather take that hour and sit with a book or go for a walk, versus do something that say, okay, I'm making a couple dollars for it, but really, who cares? Why am I doing this? So that's how I evaluate
cool.
anything. So that means this must be very interesting, because it's an hour I'm not reading a book or walking my dog. I'm talking to you. And
Let's hope.
People.
Andy, I learned a ton. This was super, super interesting listening to you. I hope we can do it again. Thank you so much for making this time. And I hope to talk to you soon.
Well, let me know how this goes. Let me know that when you show it to others, if they don't, click off or throw things at the screen.
It's all good. As long as we surprise them, as long as they feel something.
Indeed, as long as they feel something. Well put. Well put. Be well, my friend.
Thank you, Andy. We'll talk soon.
Until then.
All right. Have a good
one.
Okay. Bye-bye.